Hello, Jamie Goode here. I'm in Niagara on the lake right now. I'm standing next to the Niagara River. Behind me you can see that river, and on the other side of the river is the US border. So I'm in a corner of Canada, the Niagara Wine region. It's about 90 minutes drive from Toronto, and this is a really exciting place at the moment. There's lots of activity, a lot of wine being made here, and increasingly some really interesting wines with this cool climate sensibility. It's just past 8 in the morning. It's already hot and humid. Very eastern North America in climate. And so the idea that we're in Canada, that should be really cool climate, is probably a little bit misguided, because actually what you have here in terms of wine growing is a short, warm season. But it tapers beautifully into the autumn, and it's a region with a talent for making Cabernet Franc, Gamay, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Riesling. They're the main varieties grown here. And they all show this lovely delicacy and focus, yet with some mid-palate warmth. I think it's the extra heat in the summer that gives that. So over the next few days, I'll be taking a deep dive into the region's wines, visiting quite a few producers and tasting wines from others. And I'm going to report back on it. So Harald, where are we?
We're on our veranda at Hidden Bench Vineyards on the Beansville Bench in Niagara.
And when did you start?
We started, our first vintage was 2003. So next year will be 20 years here on the bench.
And the term bench, so just to explain what that means, I mean, what's special about the bench?
Well, the bench is basically a large deposit of glacial moraine that is comprised of limestone, clay, and silt, which makes the terroir very different from other regions in Niagara as well as in North America.
And you've got a few vineyard sites. It's similar sorts?
It's actually, they're similar but different. I mean, it's interesting, we just tasted some wines, and it was quite evident on the Pinot that one side is more clay-based and the other side is has more limestone, and you can really see that in the wines as well.
And more generally, what's special about Niagara as a wine growing place?
I think what I love about Niagara is that it really is sort of halfway between California and Burgundy, and you basically get the best and the worst from both regions. And I think what's interesting, we're starting to see that our vines are starting to mature to the point that we can really develop a Ontario or a bench character to our wines that is unique to other wine growing regions.
And the climate here, what's the role of the lake?
Well, the lake actually is what protects us in the wintertime, because the lake, 1 kilometer north of the winery here, the Lake Ontario is about 400 feet deep, and this large mass of water acts as a heat sink in the wintertime to keep our vines from getting frozen out with our cold Canadian winters. It also helps cool the vineyards in the summertime, because that large mass of water doesn't get much warmer than 70 degrees every year.
And so if you're closer to the lake, presumably you get cooler summers but warmer winters?
Yeah, you would probably, that's probably, I don't know, because we're relatively close to the lake, so I really haven't, I'm sure there is someone who has done a study on that, but I wouldn't be able to confirm that.
And what are the talents of this part of Niagara?
What do you mean by the talents?
Which great varieties are really showing that?
I'm a Pinophile, so I think Pinot, Chardonnay, Riesling, Gamay, and Cabernet Franc are probably the varietals that excel in our area.
Thank you.
Get you a spittoon. So what we're doing now is the Toussaint release, which is on the 1st of November, or the All Saints, 2 years after the wine's birthday. And these are the 8 Pinots and the 9 Chardots. And we're going to sneak the Clos Jardin where it would naturally occur in between most of our stuff, which is Vineland, and the Clos Jardin is of course Jordan, but together 20-mile bench, but totally different. So since they're done the same way, and we're going from east to west here, we're going to slip the Clos in, because it's the same winemaker, and see if we can't see a terroir difference. So we call this mapping Niagara one vineyard at a time, because we don't have a BIVB to do it for us. You know, we haven't got to that level of sophistication to have a governmental thing, and we're not that far along. So
How long have you been making Pinot Noir and Chardonnay here?
I've been making Pinot Noir and Chardonnay here since 2003. My last vintage in Oregon was 2002 at Lemelson Vineyards. And, but of course I went back and made my own Oregon for about 7 years. And then Niagara started to be the emptiest warehouse. Burgundy was, you know, good sales, Oregon was good sales, but Niagara was flying off the racks. And so things that make you go, like maybe I should do more Niagara in my own country. People seem to want it. So it's a limestone terroir, but it's more like the dolomitic terroir of the Alto Adige. And I'm on a trip on Tuesday heading out to the Alto Adige to see what the commonality is. And I rather suspect they get quite a bit more sunshine up there, and the wines are a little bigger and a little more dense. And we're a little more floral and a little fruitier, but we still have a solid limestone backbone.
What's the strength of Niagara as a wine region?
Well, I really think the strength of Niagara as a wine region, it's not what I do, but one of the first strengths is able to be a maritime climate and a continental climate. If you're on the bench, you're continental, and if you're close to the lake, you're very much like a maritime climate like Bordeaux or Portugal. But here on the bench, we're more like Burgundy, because once the lake stays warm in the end of the season, the summer cools down, the lake stays warm and keeps the lakeside vineyards warm, but they don't keep us warm on the bench. So the vines struggle to ripen, and I believe the mother vine pulls up more minerality that way. So we kind of sort of said, you know, hey, the bad news is we're in our 50s and we don't own anything, in our early 50s when we started. And then we said, okay, well, why don't we start to map Niagara? The good news is we don't own anything. The bad news. So over here you have the old town of Niagara-on-the-Lake. Niagara-on-the-Lake does have a bench, the Lowry Vineyard, that was planted for Carl Kaiser.
You're really focused on the bench terroirs.
Yeah, except for we have quite a bit of Gamay in Niagara-on-the-Lake, because that's the old plantings, 81, 83, 84, and it's delicious Niagara-on-the-Lake Gamay. And then the bench, of course, is so different and so much more mineral, but equally lovely. And by the time you do our last vineyard here, that's called the Frontier Block, Grimsby Hillside, that's Hamilton. After that, it becomes Hamilton, at least in area, but the city doesn't start for a while. So it's really, we're trying to do it from one end to the other.
And you like going from east to west in tastings then?
I like going from east because that shows Niagara-on-the-Lake better. You see all its minerality, but then you get into some real crunchy minerality here. And as we've talked of before, when you take the bench going east and you cross, you're in the USA. So I'd love to do an international thing on both sides to show the terroir is the same.
Are there any vineyards there?
Yeah, there's 6 here, 6 or 7 good ones there. It tends to be very far from the lake quickly, whereas look at our distance right here at the back cave. Look at how far we are from the lake, and so we have some effect. The Clos Jardin and our Wismar Foxcroft and Wingfield are quite far from the lake, but it pales. Look at the USA. I mean, they're really more subject to the weather. So that's why the more August vineyards in the US are down.
So once you go past the bench, you get to the ridge, yeah?
You get to the ridge.
Are there many things on the ridge?
There are, like Talon Ridge is up there. There's a bunch of vineyards up there, and we're going to try to dig into those as the years go by. And we also have to dig into Lincoln Lakeshore and creek shores here, which are very much like the Niagara-on-the-Lake of the bench.
Are they more clay dominated?
They're more clay dominated, unless there was a stream running there before, like around the Jordan Harbor, where Pearl, Morissette, and Hansberger are. But this winter, they got devastated, the creek shores, right? Because they're flatter and the air didn't flow out. So it's going to be a moment of reckoning for Niagara. There are vineyards to pull out. What grapes are going to be replanted? It's going to be very interesting to see.
And you're a massive Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Gamay fan.
That's it. And Aligoté when someone will plant it for me.
Yeah.
But I can't get it thus far. So there you go. Is not sell Bachelder. Did you hear the word Bachelder in there? Never once. I'm trying to sell, Terroir exists here. So look, if Niagara Lake starts over there in Pinot and comes through Hank, right here, Hank, Vineland, and ends up here in a new vineyard that's Bald Family Vineyard that we're also doing way below Angel's Gate organically. Then we start here again in the east with Baishu and Wilms. And that's all I want to do with you, 1 barrel of each. Nothing exhaustive. And look at the color of Wilms, man. It never has color. It's so virus, this vineyard. Do you remember how you felt about Wilms last time we had it? So it has this red and dark fruit flavor.
So behind me is the lake, and if you went to the other side at around 50 kilometres, you'd hit Toronto. You can see it sometimes, you can't see it very clearly today. But this lake is what makes a viticulture possible here in Niagara. At its deepest, it goes 400 metres deep, huge body of water, it's like a sea, and this acts as a thermal amplitude device. So it stops the winters getting too cold, and it keeps the summers from getting too hot. And it's quite impressive on a beautiful morning like this. Queylus. So where are we?
We're at Domaine Queylus in the bustling metropolis of St. Anne's. It's a little bit further outside of the local wine region, about 10 minutes.
What's the story here?
It's our life, basically. The story is that I think we make really good Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and we're really focused on Cabernet Franc, and we make a little bit of Merlot, and that's our goal.
And Niagara generally, what's the strengths of the Niagara region, and and also is there a lot of difference among the different sub-regions, and how do you tease that out in terms of winemaking?
Well, what do you think the strengths are?
Varietal, I would say Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc, Chardonnay, and Riesling as well. I think that the bench does Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Riesling very, very well, as well as Cab Franc. And then in Niagara on the Lake, I would say Cabernet Franc for sure. You can get some of those later ripening varietals there, as well as Chardonnay.
I think people are our strength. I think we're really collaborative as an industry, so we're not competitive, so winemakers are willing to share information, and that alone, as a team, we are just locking arms and rising the quality of Ontario wines year over year. I think we had a bit of work to do 15 years ago, but now we're fine-tuning it. We're really into those final stages where every year we're just making it a little bit better, and that's because we're all helping each other. So I think that's a competitive advantage for us.
And your Pinot Noirs, we just tasted them, really, really impressed. What's the secret to good Pinot Noir in this region?
I think you have to be obsessed with Pinot Noir. I think I eat, sleep, and breathe it. I do lose sleep over Pinot. I wake up in the middle of the night worrying about it, whether it's during the growing season or whether it's something in tank. Success with Pinot, it requires dedication. It can't just be something that you've slid into a portfolio because you think you like to make Pinot. It's so complicated, and I feel like instinctively you have to outsmart it every time. So you have to be there in the growing season, in the tank, in the bottle, in its élevage. It's super high maintenance.
And Chardonnay?
Chardonnay is, Chardonnay is like, I'm just struggling with Chardonnay because I do feel like we've just made a couple of really great Chardonnays. I have a vision and a focus for Pinot. I don't have the vision and the focus as much for Chardonnay. We start with something and Chardonnay just kind of becomes what it wants to, and then you can make the best out of it afterwards. I can't say, Pinot, I will wrangle it and I will win. Chardonnay, I'm a little softer with it and I let it do its thing and see what it gives me first. I don't know.
Do you get much vintage variation here?
Yeah.
Leading question, I know.
Yeah, we have a hell of vintage variation. I don't even think we know what a regular, like, you know, we don't even get normal vintage variation. We get extremes here. I think that's one of the challenges with Ontario winemaking is that, you know, it's hard to have one vintage that's much like another one. And we have to look over 10 to 12 years to be able to start saying and comparing vintage to vintage. If you're a new winemaker or a young winemaker, you don't have that background. You can't just say, oh, it's like the last 3 years. You need to know what it was like here in 2002. She wasn't a winemaker in 2002, I can tell you that. You know?
I think too at Domaine Queylus, we favor a cooler vintage, and we have had a hold on what we like to do in a cooler vintage, and we know what we want to do. And after 2016 and then 2020, I feel like we're really getting a hold of what we need to do in a hotter vintage to keep the vintage not as drastically different from hot to cool.
Yeah, you can see it's going to be a hot vintage, so we're responding with experience. Experience definitely helps. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we didn't.
Oh, we're gonna go up that way.
This one, back sign with the hat. Yeah, exactly.
It's a nice view, isn't it?
It's nice. It's beautiful.
So when I was in Napa, I drank
So tell me about Two Sisters.
Two Sisters. So we're just coming up on our 8th year open, Niagara River appellation, and very proud of it. Great proximity to 2 big bodies of water. We've got 70 acres planted on site, predominantly red fruit, owned by the Murata family, a wonderful supportive family. Love what we're doing in the cellar and the vineyard. Our focus, I would say, is on Cabernet Franc. We found a real foothold with making a great sparkling, predominant variety in our entry-level red wine, and a great single varietal Cab Franc. But that's not to say we don't give equal opportunity to everything we're producing. We're trying to become exclusively estate grown. We've got a few varieties that we're still sourcing elsewhere from some great growers, but you know, we're working on getting everything into the Niagara River appellation.
What excites you about Niagara as a place to grow wine grapes?
Sparkling wine for sure, but that's a little bit selfish of me to say. We just tasted a really great Cab Franc that I think has, you know, exceptional opportunity in the region. But I selfishly love making sparkling wine. Keeps me busy year round. The sky's the limit. The opportunity is endless for making sparkling from all different styles. So I think that's what I'm most excited about.
And there's a reasonable amount of vintage variation that you have to deal with. Do you think that makes you a better winemaker? Because you're almost having to
a better
improvise.
winemaker, just quietly. I think it's challenging to make wine in Niagara, but that's what's exciting about making wine in Niagara. We're not trying to make the same wine every single year. We're trying to stay within a house style. I think that goes for every winery in the region. You know, we're trying to stay within our confines of what style we're trying to make, but we get dealt a different hand of cards every year, and we've got to make the best hand we can with what Mother Nature deals us, and that's what keeps it exciting. You know, we're trying to stay.
And when you hit the heights, that's why it's all worth it.
Absolutely. When we hit the highs are high, the lows can be low, but the highs are absolutely high for sure.
Thank you.
not too many times, but enough times to regret doing that.
Yeah, it's too much. The wines are probably too cold.
You know, with all the time I had, I should have been prepared, right? But I'm not.
What?
So give me a second. There's 2 cherries for the dough routine.
Tell me about Malivoire.
Oh, Malivoire. Started by Martin Malivoire back in the mid-90s, a guy who came from special effects, so a guy who thinks out of the box, and came up with this really cool gravity Quonset hut winery on the Beamsville Bench with a real focus towards Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Gamay. We really are pushing Gamay and Rosé from Pinot Noir specifically on the bench as our our identity.
I really like the Gamays we just tried. What is it about Gamay that makes it so suited to the terroirs here in Niagara?
It's funny because we're on the bench, and it's the bench is made up of all the, like, it's a glacial moraine, and so there's lots of rubble from the shale and limestone, and you would think that you need granite as you do in Beaujolais, but I think that gives it a little extra structure, but a very similar kind of climate as Beaujolais, and I think it's beautifully suited. And we get some humid summers and some very cold winters, and Gamay does really well with both. So that sort of is step one, I think, in terms of being a successful variety for here. And then on top of that, I think we just get just such vibrant, lively fruit here in Ontario, and a nice kind of short, cool harvest to maintain that acidity and keep them really, really fresh.
Yeah, because these wines are weighing in around 11.5% to 12.5% alcohol, but they're fully ripe, but there's great acidity, and that's not added, presumably. That's just natural.
No, that's all natural.
Yeah. And presumably, I guess also that you see quite a bit of vintage variation here. So it's nice working with a variety that seems to be sort of resilient.
Exactly.
To this,
Yeah. I would say this. You taste the 2020, which was very hot. Very dry vintage compared to 2021, which was, certainly for the harvest was a lot cooler and more wet. And we still get the same kind of character. You really push the fruit forward, and the acidity doesn't fade during ripening. So even in a hot year, you get that great acidity. And it can be quite prolific in terms of yield. It tends to want to be a pretty big producer in the vineyard, but we manage that pretty easily. We're thinning it multiple times throughout the year, and so we get something really consistent every year, which is really nice.
Tell me about Cave Spring.
Cave Spring is a passion project of 2 families, and it's always been about place. So it's called Cave Spring because the place itself is special and protected and has been from origin.
And one of your main speciality is, I guess, Riesling, yeah?
Yes.
So tell us about Riesling in the Niagara region.
Riesling in Niagara or Riesling at Cave Spring?
Well, first of all, Cave Spring.
Okay, well, Riesling at Cave Spring is special because the soils are heavy, which tend to give us a low pH, high acid, and so we get very ripe fruit but crisp acidity. So we can push dryness and mouthfeel, and it just the brand kind of speaks for itself. CSV, and that gives you that bold, ripe, fresh, yet structured Riesling.
And more generally in the Niagara region, Riesling has been a very important variety. Why is that, and what's the potential here for this variety?
Well, like every wine region in the world, there is limiting factors that Mother Nature dictates. And in Niagara, that limiting factor, or at least the major limiting factor, is winter. And Riesling is a king of winter. So it survives the winter, it breaks bud late, and also hangs well into the fall. So you can extend growing seasons. You don't have to worry about frost risk, winter damage. All those variables are minimized. And so it is proliferated in Niagara, and the style shows.
And is it true that you used to be an actor?
Yes, it is.
And can we find you on IMDb?
Just my name, not my face.
Okay,
Not
great.
that successful.
Thank you.